All right, let's figure out what's leaking around this water pump. So in order to access the water pump, you actually have to remove the intake manifold. Now I did this in 2 days because once I got the top section off, which has the throttle, I wanted to let the bolts that actually held this manifold on, I wanted to have them soak overnight. And I'm glad I did. So if you take a look at them, they are pretty cruddy. Now, I was a body mechanic for about 10 years, and I'll tell you, this stuff was never a contender. Never really did the job, but I watched a recent shootout of newer penetrating oils, and apparently this is the top brass. So I gave it a try, and it did the job. Again, it actually saturated all the way through, and all the corrosion and rust had a dampness when I pulled the bolts out, and they cracked right open with very little force. So this stuff, $6 or $7 at your AutoZone, Advanced Auto, pretty good deal. Now, this, once you get the intake manifold, you're going to be able to access what they call the Valley of Death. I've watched a lot of other videos where people get this off, and this valley down here is full of coolant and oil. Now that causes problems because it's corrosive over time and it can actually eat holes in the block. But surprisingly enough, I don't have that, but I have a lot of sand. Let me show you this here. If I get down in here, you can see there's a lot of sand. I even found a tool right here. Just laying down in there. Someone must have forgot. But I bought this in West Virginia. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland on the East Coast. But he had bought this in Vegas some 30 years ago. So it's kind of funny that it's still sitting in here. And I'm surprised whenever this water pump was replaced, because you have to do this to access the water pump, that someone didn't clean this out. They just left it. But it's kind of cruddy down here. There's all kinds of little blooms of corrosion and of course sand. So I'm gonna have to clean that up, and hopefully I don't find anything crazy once I do. Now you can see on the water pump itself, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 hoses in the front and then 2 in the back. Now these are the ones that I've read that usually cause the issue that I was seeing, where it's dripping down underneath the water pump. It's kind of hard to see, but if I get this in here, you can actually see there's some coolant right down in there. So it's right below this hose right here. So I'm hoping that's where it's coming from. I haven't yet accessed the radiator because I want to do a pressure test on this. So I'm hoping it has a cap that I can put the pressure tester on, and that way I can find the leak easily. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to go to a plan B. But we're gonna have to clean this up, get her looking pretty. I'm gonna get a new O-ring gasket intake set with new bolts, because those cruddy ones are not going to go back in there. Also, the washers were completely just rusted away. So I'm gonna have to get into that, and hopefully that's all I run into, and we can get her put back together and move on to some other. So I stopped by my local auto parts store on the way home and picked up some extra coolant and a drain pan because I really wanted to figure out why this thing is leaking. And I came home and I ended up coming home to a puddle again, which is odd because it stopped leaking about a week and a half ago, and then it started leaking again. This is without me putting coolant or anything in it. It's just me removing the intake manifold. So I started getting a little irritated because I'm like, why is this leaking again? So I did a little research and did a little prodding and used one of these guys, a handy dandy little mirror, because I knew it was coming from the bottom of the water pump. So I was thinking it was a hose or it was the actual back cover gasket, because when you replace these things, you reuse the back cover and just get a new gasket. So I was thinking maybe someone installed the gasket incorrectly, but it actually turned out to be the big 2-3 inch hose that's on the back, and it's bulged, which is a bad sign to begin with. So what I'm going to do right now is show you where this is. The first thing you're looking at is at the bottom of the back cover, there's a drip that's forming, and it's dripping down. So my first thought was, crap, the back cover's cracked. Well, if you look a little further, I'm going to try to catch this. There's actually saturation around that big hose. Now it's kind of hard to catch, but that little glare that you see in the corner is actually coolant leaking out, and it's dripping down the back cover and then dripping down and causing the leak. So this is actually a very good thing. It's only a $6 replacement hose. I'm gonna get the back cover just in case, but I think we found our culprit. I'm still gonna remove all these coolant lines, the aluminum ones, so I can clean that valley out, but I think we found our problem, and it is not a big deal at all. So we are happy. All right, so now I got everything removed. I got the Y pipe out. I got that long run that goes from that nipple back to that hose. That's out. I'm actually getting a new one of those because that is metal and not aluminum. So I wanted to replace that. It's only about a $50 part. Found the leak exactly right away. I thought that it was that big hose, and it was. The funny thing is that this Y pipe, when I took it out, sits down in here. Once I got these front bolts unloose, it literally just pulled out. So that pipe wasn't even, or that tube wasn't even tight. I was hesitant to take that Y pipe out because even DeLorean says that the bolts are prone to breaking, and to not attempt it unless you have retapping skills, know how to use Healy coils, and I really didn't want to have to deal with broken off bolts in an engine block. So what I did was I took that penetrating oil that I'm raving about recently and soaked the bolts daily for about 4 days, sometimes twice a day. Just came down here and kept shooting juice in it. And just like everything else, they cracked out no problem, and I did not have to break a sweat. So we got the valley cleaned out. It looks really good. No additional problems there. All the way down in these pits, there's nothing. So we're good. Don't have any corrosion in the actual block. I got the Y pipe and the intake manifold itself kind of cleaned up with some engine bright. It's not shiny, but they're cleaner than they were. I have the gasket kit coming in tomorrow. I'm gonna try to put this thing back together this weekend, and then we can move on.